All right, welcome back, guys. We got a quick video here. We're doing Cody Sanchez's most failed businesses. I kind of suspect dropshipping will probably be on this, restaurants, and we'll see what else. But whenever you're starting a business, it's extremely important to make sure that your model for how you're actually going to be successful is right in the beginning. That way you're leveraging the chances you have of success to be the highest possible, because businesses have an extremely high failure rate. And before we jump into the video here, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It does a lot in helping me reach other entrepreneurs just like you who are trying to grow their businesses and invest the profits. So that being said, let's just jump right on in, guys.
Ebook, you can make sure your marketing business is as polished and
Here we go.
Professional as you really are. Here's how. I'm Millie,
66% of entrepreneurs will never start a business because they're too scared of failing. How do you give yourself the highest likelihood of succeeding in a business? You follow the data. In this video, we're going to break down for you the businesses with the highest failure rate and the lowest failure rate, so you can pick one where you can win. Gyms, not one of my favorite businesses. You want to know why? 80% of them fail within the first year, 81% to be precise. Now, the cool part about gyms is you typically don't need all of this. You don't need a giant.
So really funny, literally like why Alex Hormozi quit doing gyms and pursued a licensing model, or really a coaching consulting offer to gym owners. Why? There was tons of gym owners that didn't make a lot of money. He solved that problem for them, making their gyms more profitable. But you can even listen to him talk about how his rates were in the past. Extremely difficult to get those gyms and scale them.
Giant building. You don't need a huge location that's prime. You could have a little CrossFit gym with a box and start it with a couple $100K and some friends, which is what a lot of people do. Here's the problem with gym businesses. Typically the owners start a gym business as a hobby, right? They like to work out, so they want to put their name on the building, and that's what they do, which means that they neglect the finances. They don't have a marketing plan. They do things custom. They don't have standard pricing. They don't have third-party products that they take a cut on and sell, and they don't do high margin, which is things like subscriptions and also personalized training at a really expensive level. One of the secrets to wealth in general is if you want to get rich, sell things to rich people because they pay more. Gyms are a really hard business to do that. Now, there are models that work. Gold's been around forever. It's a franchise. And there's basically two ways you can do a gym. You can have a Gold's gym, and you can have a Planet Fitness, where they kind of expect you to subscribe and then really never come. Or you can have an Equinox, where they expect you to come, but you're going to pay for it. That's the difference between like $10 a month and $200 or $300 a month. Regardless, I think just go get swole when you go to the gym. And if you want to make your bank account swole, pick another business.
So she hit on the only thing I would add there right at the end, where it's like a lot of people who are really passionate about fitness think, oh, I want to start a gym. This is how I can make money doing what I love. But like she just said, these businesses have a terrible failure rate. So one of the things to remember is just because you're really passionate about something doesn't mean you should necessarily pursue it, because that is how you lose money and go out of business.
ATMs. I get pitched this business all the time because it seems easy, and like it might not take that much money to start. Let me tell you why I don't like this business.
Other issue about ATMs, and why you get pitched all the time about them, is it's like the whole mailbox money scenario, and it can actually be really difficult to make happen.
Because of the math. Average 3 to 5 transactions a day of $80 to $100, the average transaction size. You get 1 to 2% of it, which means you make about $2.40 to $15 a day per machine. You got to drive around and pick up the cash in all of these on at least a couple day basis. Otherwise, they get stolen. This one actually isn't located here anymore. I bet you could guess why if you pan around this area. So the money just doesn't add up. The other problem is for a machine, the machines themselves are pretty expensive. They cost 7 years on average from you giving them the money for the machine to you paying it all back with the revenue and profits of the business. The other reason is, let's think about it this way.
So like a vending machine, but way lower margins.
Anybody got cash on them in this group? I know the answer to that, and that's no, except maybe Samuel. But most people these days are not carrying cash around. So we're having a declining user base with really tiny margins and a lot of logistics. Tough business. The second way that people make money on ATMs is they charge a surcharge, right? So you take a percentage of the transaction cost, 1 to 2 to 5%, and then you might add a surcharge, which is like $2 to $5 per transaction. So that is where you could make your meatier transaction. But again, if you're only doing 3 to 5 transactions today at a normal location, that's not going to be enough. Now, how could this business work? If you're outside of a cannabis store where they will only take cash, this could work. If you're outside of a bar where they require a ton of cash, this business could work. But then you're going to have to pay more for rent on that location also. Here's the thing, at the end of the day, I think you need 50 to 100 ATMs to make enough profit for it to be worthwhile as a full-time gig. If you want to have a little side hustle, you want to learn the game of business, you want to learn your P&L, you want to start small, somebody else can fund you or you can lease the ATMs, then we're good to go. Why I would never buy a dry cleaning business, or why Cody Sanchez hates dry cleaners. Let me tell you 2 reasons. The first one is, look at this graph. We've basically seen the number of establishments plunge, meaning people are using them a lot less. Probably has to do with the fact that suits are going out, more people are working from remote, and less things that need to be dry cleaned are part of our everyday life. The second reason is, one word, and it's called remediation. So if you go on the internet right now, you'll see like hundreds of dry cleaners selling for $100,000 to $200,000, and you can often sell or finance them. So why wouldn't I like those? It's because I was looking up the math for you guys. If you use a dry cleaner the old way, there could be a lot of toxicity right here underneath our feet. That needs to be cleaned up by whoever owns the business. It's called remediation. How much does that cost is fascinating.
Building your online business?
Yeah.
Go to Wix.com and set up your store on a single integrated platform.
The EPA right now thinks that 75% of the dry cleaners in the US are contaminated, the soil underneath them is, and that they have 650 gallons of hazardous waste that they need to clean up. But how much does a hazardous waste cleanup cost? Anywhere from, it could be $5 to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on how deep it is and in what state, city, etc. I don't want to buy a business that's only making $100,000 or $200,000 or run one that's only making that much, and then I got to pay for somebody to come clean up all this toxicity. Plus, aren't we all green these days? Isn't that where we're going? So anyway, thank you to dry cleaners that exist, but also be careful about what's underneath your feet. Hotels. These are not businesses. This is real estate masquerading as a business. Let me tell you why the data says these businesses are really tough. Look at these margin numbers. So on average, you make $94,000 a year, but the average expense for a hotel is $96,000 a year. So they're losing 2%. Why is that okay? Because they use the real estate depreciation, kind of a fancy word to say that they use the ability to decrease their taxes in order for these things to become actually profitable. So they're not even profitable unless you're messing around with the IRS. Also, I don't know about you, but I don't want to have a business where somebody can call me at 2 in the morning and yell at me and expect service right away. 24/7 support is what you have when you have a hotel business. There's enough going wrong in business for you to wake up at 8, have a cup of coffee, and then deal with it. I think that's efficient. The other thing is, this is a complex business because you see we're at one right now. And if you were to look around, you basically see a bunch of people behind me are doing landscaping, right? A bunch of people behind me are redoing the bar over here. It's complex, it requires 24/7 support and a ton of humans to run this business. Not to mention, look at what's happening to this industry. So back in the day, there were 20 major hotel companies in the 2000s. Now there are only 10. So we've consolidated the industry, and those 10 own 65% of the market. So if you want to get into hotels and be independent like this lady is, she's a legend in hotels, by the way, it's really hard. And so you have to end up going franchising. Most 67% of all hotels are franchised hotels. Here's the problem with that. They take a ton of your revenue, and they leave you with something like 2 to 7% total revenue at the end for you to run the business. Since these contracts run 10 to 15 years on average, you better make sure that that franchise is one you want to stick with for a while.
And the other thing about hotels is it's one of those businesses that is a 24/7 business. Grew up, grandpa was a rancher. Ranching, 24/7 type of a business. Not quite as bad as dairy farmers, but man, they're just like the types of businesses that, and like every business, lives in your head 24/7. It is your baby. It is the one thing that sometimes people will love more than their children, which is complete insanity, but it's just because of how much life, of your life, you put into it to make it work. But, and the biggest thing, especially like with hotels or mercy dairy farms or any type of farm, there's certain farmers, there's 2x4 farmers. They put 2-week or 2 4-week stints in, or 2 2-week stints depending on acreage in the Midwest. They plant their freaking corn, they harvest their corn. That's it. They've gone to no-till. They have an applicator come out to put on the fertilizer, any herbicides they need, any pesticides they need for them. It's cheaper that way, and then they go do whatever else they have. They stick to their day job. They just come send the combine to harvest, and they come send the tractor to plant. That's it. And there's aspects of businesses like that where it is on your mind if it's going to rain or not. But it's not like the dairy cow that needs fed constantly, that has to be milked constantly, that has to have the crap cleaned out of the barn constantly. It's not like the hotel where you have someone coming to you at 2 a.m. Do you have a toothbrush? Do you have a razor? Do you have this? Do you have that? Trying to leave at 5 a.m. All of these different things. Taking your hotel keys, which are an expense to the business. Just so many different little things that add up. And again, if you love hotels, if you're in the service business and you love real estate, hotels could be a great fit for you. But it's not what I would suggest.
This hotel's amazing. The grounds are beautiful, but the problem with a hotel like this is, can you imagine what it costs to run this thing nonstop?
Sorry?
I think we've been kicked out of 17 businesses now. Amazon FBA, the other type of business that is my least favorite of all of them. Let me tell you why. Although I have a bunch of friends that made money, and you have all these young YouTubers all over the internet telling you how much money you can make doing it fulfilled by Amazon and how easy it is and how seamless it is, the truth of the matter is the math doesn't math. One, because if there is one platform that has more risk to, one, being your biggest competitor, which Amazon does, two, allowing a bunch of Chinese knockoffs to come compete with you, and three, actually giving your data to both your competitors and then taking your data about what sells and using it for their own, it's Amazon. Huge platform risk. The second reason why I don't like fulfilled by Amazon businesses is you actually can't touch your customers. How wild is that? You buy from my store on Amazon, and I send to your house my product, pens, let's say. I cannot get your contact information or your address. And oh, by the way, I'm not even allowed to put something in the packaging that asks for you to write a review or that asks for you to get more information. You're completely divorced from your customers, which is one of the most dangerous things that you can do in business overall. Let's get.
Yeah, so huge issue right there. I will lump Etsy into Amazon. Family sold lavender, long story there, on Etsy probably done over $100,000 in sales on Etsy, and we run into that same issue, and randomly they just blacklist your store and you don't have sales. So it's one of those things that you have to watch, otherwise you just get absolutely decimated on.
Get into the math really quickly. We can actually see how many Amazon sellers make money or not. Fast forward through what all these numbers mean, only 1% of sellers succeed with an annual salary of around $100,000 to $250,000, while 27% achieve about $5,000 in total sales. Here's all the numbers for you. Now, a lot of people can be while 27% achieve about $5,000 in total sales. Here's all.
Okay, so big thing here, Mercy. Let's see. 1% make between 100 and 250,000. 2% unknown. Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a group that makes more than 250 plus. But if you think of like this, like 100 to $250,000, what 250 I think is top 5% of American income. But you have to be the 1% in your industry to only be top 5% in the rest of the US. So odds there just aren't super great. If you're going to be 1% in your industry, you might as well be 1% in an industry that will put you in the 1% in America. So basically 400K plus per year. Actually, it might be 600K plus per year. It's kind of hard to tell.
All the numbers for you. Now, a lot of people can be break even inside of a year because they don't have all the crazy upfront costs you get with a business, but your ability to make six-figure income, tough. So I suppose you could have some fun. You could experiment with all the 27-year-olds on YouTube talking about Fulfilled by Amazon, but the likelihood that it's going to make you hundreds of thousands of dollars is really quite slim. Furthermore, I'm really concerned about the fact that you put in all this time and effort and work, and then one thing changes on the algorithm and you're no longer listed at the top. Oh, and not to mention, the last time that I was looking at one of our businesses that had a percentage of their revenue from Amazon, they started getting competitors who actually gave fake reviews and bought their product in order to tank their rankings, because if you have one negative review on average, you need 10 to 20 positive reviews to offset it. That business, eviscerated. So be very careful. We like Jeff Bezos. Great for the world, 24-hour delivery.
Buy his stock, don't do business on his platform. But then again, if you own what the product you're making and you're using Amazon to distribute, it can be a great way to cover your break-even costs because the volume is just insane on Amazon.
Incredible. For our bottom line, probably not. Retail stores are the next one I wouldn't buy. Incredibly high failure rates. Look at this. The other reason is, if you think about it, these are really high rent locations, meaning that it's expensive to just even have your feet on the ground here. Second is the user base is declining. What do you mean? Well, more and more we shop online, Amazon, and at e-commerce as opposed to in person. So the graph goes like this, which is usually not a great tell in a business that you're starting. The other reason is they have something called negative float, which sounds like kind of maybe technical, but negative float, all that means is that you pay money upfront for clothes, maybe a season or two ahead, and you only get money when somebody buys it eventually after waiting for it to be shipped to you and then hoping that you sell to somebody else. It's also really hard to determine what inventory should look like. That's why retail freaks me out. I call this a cash suck business, not a cash flow business. And while I'm really happy to window shop, I think if you just need that little retail store to sell live, laugh, love t-shirts, maybe do it as a loss leader. That is a business that you have a ton of money and you don't want to make any more. And as the saying goes with vineyards, the same goes with retail, which is if you want to make $1 million with a retail store, start with $3 million. This statistic is wild. As of April 2023, there were 8 big retailers that went completely bankrupt, Bed Bath & Beyond included. In 2022, there were 10 retailers in the
The other thing about like little boutiques is typically like, I mean, the margins just really aren't there between materials and then also like leasing your space because you're leasing prime real estate, and it can be really hard to make up for that when your margins are razor thin and you're selling like on products that are also like razor thin. So for example, like all these like boutiques that sell like let's say like little prairie style like dresses or the like whatever is like in style for the summer for women. The issue is you're importing those clothes. You are then trying to pay employees to sell those clothes, and then you're also trying to pay your landlord. And the thing is clothing like that doesn't have a huge margin to begin with. Malls have experienced lower and lower foot traffic, although it has bounced back some from COVID. But again, it's still prime traffic where it's like if you're selling something in a mall, it needs to be like a higher margin, such as jewelry or heck, freaking Tesla cars, where there's a lot wider margin on people making those purchases. Or it needs to be something where there's a high enough volume. And you can see that's part of the reason why like dedicated brands. So companies like Patagonia. Oh, what's the new stinking llama one? I forgot the name of it. Cotopaxi. It's why they do good. One is because they're vertical. They control their manufacturing process. They're not just retailing like other brands or other designers' clothes, but also they are doing things that are a relatively high volume, and that's why they can sustain themselves in these high traffic areas. Again, it can just be really difficult if you're just starting out. Plus, they get a little bit of volume of scale. They also sell online. And if you're just starting out a boutique, it's really hard to also take advantage of those online sales just because to build out. And granted, it's easier these days with like things like Shopify. You can actually realistically do it. But for a long time, it's been really hard to do that. It just doesn't make the odds great.
The entire year. This is not a good trajectory. The other one that freaks me out is the percentage rate of businesses that still operate after the first 4 years in business in the retail industry is less than 47% after the first year's 90% failure rate. Woo! No mathematician, but that don't look good. Restaurants, really tough business to win in. Actually, one of my least favorite ones, as evidenced by one failed right behind us right now. Look at all of this real estate that is now empty.
Yeah, restaurants do not have great margins. Again, prime real estate.
How about one time?
And how expensive it
High
had to be to
cost
get
goods sold.
started. The average small business in the US sells for somewhere around $800,000, but the average restaurant sells for $198,000. Why? Because they're really hard to win at over the long term. In fact, I was looking up some stats for you guys. 60% fail in year one, 80% in 4 years. Huge competition. In fact, scroll down this street to see what they're working with. We've got Juiceland, we've got Chipotle, we've got something at the end, we've got a Hot Dottie over here, and we've got 3 more restaurants right next to them. So why do restaurants fail? Lots of reasons. One is they run out of cash because they don't have enough money up front. The average build of a restaurant is anywhere from $200,000 to $1 million to build out. That's a lot of quan. Second is they have to have a lot of money to keep running, both for wages for employees, but more than anything for the food that they need to sell you. Plus, there's this little word called spoilage, which is awful, which basically means that that food can't last forever like a t-shirt can, and so you got to pay for it over time. One of the other big things that nobody thinks about with restaurants is it's really hard to keep a consumer with you over time, and often they don't give you their contact information. They just wipe a credit card. So as opposed to an online business where you can email them, tell them to come back, a restaurant, you can't really do anything unless you're really smart about getting referrals. If you have to start a restaurant, then you might want to start one like this. They have lower failure rates as fast food joints. This one here is called a full service restaurant, a lot more expensive to run, much higher failure rate. That is a lower failure rate. Also, I do own some restaurants, or at least parts of them. It doesn't mean you can't make money in these things. It's just what's the highest likelihood to fail and how good of an operator you have to be. I own part of a restaurant called The Well. It's awesome. But they've also got these pop-up stores, and these things are the real part that makes money. Trucking, transportation. This is called last mile delivery, and this area is booming. In fact, the success rate is about 76.4% to do this. Now, obviously, you're not going to start your own FedEx or stand in the middle of the street because that's annoying, and now we're going to get on influencers in the wild. But what you can do is there's a bunch of trucking companies where you can own routes like this for UPS trucks, for instance, and you can also do last mile delivery for local stores. This business is booming. Why? Because you animals won't stop ordering things on Amazon. Me either. In fact, here's a last mile truck right here. See guys, there's another one. That's a prime last mile delivery truck, which also you can do the same thing for. The statistics are ridiculous. Look at this. 53% of total shipping costs are related to the last mile. 1 mile of your shipping is most of the costs. 90% of consumers see 2 to 3 day delivery as an expectation because, you know, we see no magic in the world anymore. It's an $84.72 billion projected value of just the last mile delivery market. In-house delivery fleets are the most common type of last mile delivery. 42% of all companies require some help from a last mile fleet delivery. So that means, as opposed to those other businesses we showed you, your demand curve is going to go like this. Now, there are a lot of tough parts about shipping and logistics and transport businesses, such as expensive trucks, so you want to be careful on leasing, such as the ability for you to have drivers that are good, although I saw Waymo go by, so in the future.
Fun fact, Amazon, and if you look at their trucks, they have purposely done trucks where you don't need, they're the maximum size without being subject to other regulations. And that's why you see these like 14-foot tall Dodge vans that aren't the FedEx trucks, because those go under different regulations. They're taxed differently. They have to operate differently. But they did a really good job of arbitraging essentially what the current laws are to take advantage of the situation in the markets that they're serving. Now, is this ethical? Debatable, but it's just one of the ways, like, if you're going to start a last mile delivery service, look at how you can navigate the laws, how you can get vehicles and make things that make the most sense for you to get your business off the ground and get going. Whether that's electric vehicles, the size of the vehicle, to match the regulations, the technology that you're going to use to do last mile delivery, how you're going to get contracts to do last mile delivery, all of that.
Sure, maybe they're autonomous. So let's say you, like me, could never drive this thing, and maybe this is too expensive for you to get. Well, you can actually do a courier business too, which is basically like a version of side hustling and Ubers, but sometimes they're certified, and so you can make more money doing them. There's levels to the game that usually correlate with the size of the truck. I think this business, for a good operator, even though there's probably not huge margins, could be a really interesting business, and data seems to agree with me. Senior care centers. This one actually surprised me. I didn't realize how low a failure rate these businesses have, but I guess it makes sense for a couple different reasons. First of all, you've got government subsidies and state subsidies. So the government knows they need to take care of senior citizens, so they provide an easier way for people to do that. That's point one. The second point that's interesting is if you look at the demographics of the US today, what's happening? We're having this massive balloon of baby boomers who need somewhere to go, and increasingly grandma doesn't live with us. They live in a center like this. We also are seeing this massive increase of Alzheimer's, dementia, or advanced care needs in these facilities, which actually increases how much money you can charge by 3 to 5x, although it's pretty sad. The other thing that's interesting is I was looking at this, and like this facility, millions of dollars to build. Like, how could you do this if you were a beginner? And then I realized, oh, there are these small little houses where if you zone it right, you get the proper certifications and licensing depending on the state and city that you're in, you can have a senior care center that just has 1 or 2 individuals that take care of a few people that share a house. That's super interesting. In fact, I lived by one in San Diego. And the last thing is, Let me tell you why I'd never do this business. Could you imagine being the person that has to kick somebody out of a senior care center just because they don't have money, but they're old and they're alone, and what are you gonna do? That's why I wouldn't do this business, even though apparently it's kind of hard to fail if people need a place to live no matter what. Also, cool stat, 9.18 billion.
That would be tough. That'd be really tough.
Is the size of this industry in 2022, and it's growing at like 6 to 7%, which is wild. So if you have a heart of stone and you like to take care of grandma, this might be the business for you. Real estate, rental properties in particular. Andrew Carnegie famously said 90% of all millionaires got there through some form of real estate. Now, 90% of all billionaires didn't, but if you're going for your first million, rental properties are a great way to incrementally do it, also using a bunch of tax advantages. Here, let me give you a few reasons why and some of the stats on this business. One, the success rate on real estate is crazy high, 85.3% on rental properties. That means that they don't go defunct or bankrupt as often. 44 million Americans are home renters, so there's a huge captured market, and actually that market is increasing today. The other thing that's fascinating is they spend $485 billion a year on rent. Oftentimes, it's more expensive to rent than to own on a monthly basis, so you get to benefit from that. You want to break down how much you're going to make on average based on what other people make. So landlords on average make about $97,000 a year. If mom and pop landlords own multiple properties over time, you could stack a couple hundred K. What's interesting is mom and pops, me and you, own something like 20.5 million rental units in the US, which means that there's a lot of opportunity, there's a proven model, there's a specific base case for this. Now, this has been documented all over the internet, so I won't go over it ad nauseam, but if you're going to play the rental property game, do you actually understand enough to put the guarantee and the cash down that you might need on a property, because they come after you if you can't pay it off. But I like real estate. High success business. Laundromats. This one's a fascinating business. 92% success rate. I think it's probably really somewhere between 87% and 95%. And it's because these things often are cheap to start, $100,000 to $300,000. They last for a long time. The machines last for anywhere from, let's call it 5 to 20 years on average. They have repeat customers who come week after week after week. And since the number of locations is in a decline, you're actually not seeing a ton of competition spring up. The interesting part about laundromats also are you can add additional revenue streams. So you can have a vending machine on site, you can have an ATM company. And if you want to take a laundromat that on average probably taps out at mid 6 figures in revenue, you add delivery. Delivery and what's called wash and fold. If you see inside, we'll try to sneak in there. The ladies fold the clothes like this, they put it in bags and they send out to the neighborhood. That one bag costs you something like $30 to $50, and it costs them dollars to wash and fold. And so there's actually big margin if you can understand the logistics of that business. Also, if you want to be a total stud on how to do it, you can use a company like Sense, which is a technology company. I own part of this company, by the way, that allows you to make everything to do with laundromats a lot easier. Owning laundromats isn't all sunshine and rainbows. I've owned these before. So what you really need to think about is who your customer is, because sometimes you got meth addicts outside. You also have to think about how many people are you going to have on staff. You don't make that much money in it, then you want to have a bunch of employees. So it's really nice if you can add a bunch of technology that allows you to monitor the building, to collect cash, to dispense soap without any humans around. This is something that most new owners come in and do. And a laundromat like this definitely has that. And the last thing is these laundromat machines are like buying a Honda Civic. They're like $10,000 to $30,000 each. So this part ain't cheap, but it's a 92% success rate, so they last for a while. Now you get to pick business.
Yeah, making sure the business you pick that can be successful is huge. The biggest thing I would say here, and I think she might have hit it right on the head, and I would kind of suspect this might be what she's doing with the laundromat she's requiring. I think doing like wash and folds could be huge, because you're allowing to like arbitrage time for upper middle class people who don't necessarily want to pay to fold laundry, or they have a bunch of kids plus themselves and they just don't have the time to do it with 2 working parents. And being able to have delivery be picked up and then delivered, I think there's a really big opportunity in there. Imagine like if you're charging like $50 per like load of laundry, essentially, not necessarily load, but like for the week to get laundry washed and folded and delivered, I feel like that's really stackable. And if it was like $50 per person or $25 per person, family of 4 is $100 per week user, $400 a month. Like that adds up. That is $5K a year. So I think there's some scale that could really go into something like that could be really successful.
With a high likelihood to fail, or ones with a high likelihood to succeed. But it's more than you just picking winners and losers. We're here on Main Street, and like the sign says, I love a street like this in Austin, Texas, full of small businesses that decide to give their lives serving us with something. You get to walk into an ice cream shop where people are up at 5 in the morning to make you and your family a little something. And there's magic in that happens in everyday communities by humans just like you who decide to do the hard thing, which is to actually build instead of just consume. So at this channel, we are about making Main Street millionaires. You should subscribe if you want to be one, but you should also subscribe if you want to see a Main Street like this.
Awesome. Great video. Again, if you guys haven't already, if you got here to this point in the video, please subscribe to the channel. It makes a huge difference in reaching other entrepreneurs like you that want to start businesses and invest the profits. So hopefully this video is interesting to you guys. I love Cody Sanchez's videos. They're always super interesting. Great way to learn about different types of businesses and think about them in different ways as well. Oftentimes we get stuck in our own ruts as entrepreneurs, but the great thing about this too is even if you're doing a different type of business, you can look at what other people are doing in different industries and get that cross-pollination